So cool.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Oh my god.
Wow.
This is super cool.
Hello, and welcome to Stir-Fried Fascination. This is part 2 of an interview with Peter Vuust, where we talk about music and the brain.
Oh, I actually wanted to get into, speaking of hairs.
And that's Bram van Langen, my co-host for the episode. Go ahead, Bram.
I was wondering, I was thinking of goosebumps. Can you answer why do we get goosebumps when we hear music that we like?
Why we get goosebumps from music is still pretty unknown, but there are these theories that what music does is it plays around with our predictions. We talked a lot about that last time. So let's say you have a prediction of something's going to happen and then something else is going to happen, but sometimes it's so super nice. But in fact, there's also a small fear related to something that is different. And so some researchers have speculated that this might be the reason why we get these goosebumps, because you have these immensely pleasurable situations that are also connected to these fear-related systems. And when a cat is afraid, then it raises its what you call fur, and of course it's because it makes it look bigger. So it's this fight, flight, or freeze response. I think there must be some credit to this. I remember I was reading a book by John le Carré, one of my favorite authors, and it was a very long book, and I didn't understand anything, and everything seemed to be very blurry. And it was called, I think, A Small Town in Germany. And then suddenly on page 385, it dawned on me that I had been misunderstanding everything, and everything was terrible. And and I remember very vividly that I got these goosebumps that were both pleasurable, because, you know, in a way, the brain, when you have these experiences that make you ready for flight, then the brain is, there's a lot of adrenaline and there's dopamine and a lot of different compounds to make you be able to flee faster. But these are also very pleasurable. And this is at least the same experience I can have with music. So it's a good hypothesis. I don't know whether anybody has proven it or has made a good experiment.
Yeah, it can also be difficult, as there are so many different elements that can evoke goosebumps. It could be heat, it can be cold, it can also be something pleasurable, or like music.
Yeah, but one thing we know that this, or at least we think we know, because these are pretty new studies, but they show that the dopamine release, they're very much influenced by the anticipation. So the prediction part of it is pretty well established, that this is a big part of the dopamine release to music.
Speaking of emotions, there's this concept of the blue notes. I don't actually know what they are. Probably most musicians actually know what it is already, but I have no clue.
The blue notes are, and this is also quite strange, I haven't looked into any research of it, but in the blues, you have these notes that are not really in tune, but they have to be a little bit out of tune, typically between the minor and the major third. So if you have bum bum, that's a major third, and this is a minor third, and in the blues you'll go do da 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 da. You know, so it's just slightly out of tune, and it makes it more, in a way, annoying to the brain, but also more so that you have to listen. And some people are really experts in, like a guitarist like B.B. King. That's why also guitar is, of course, a typical blues instrument, and it might not be on purpose, but at least fantastic guitar player like B.B. King, he could just twist it a little bit so it's just out of tune. And interestingly also, if you listen to John Coltrane, which is probably at least top 5 best tenor sax players in jazz who has ever lived, my personal favorite. But he would be slightly out of tune, especially when he was playing the soprano saxophone. And it sounds so nice, and nobody can do it like him. But if you look at the note, it's not on tune. And this is also something that expresses your personality. Because, like, one of the things is with John Coltrane, for instance. When he plays, you have to listen. He plays in a way so insisting. And this is part of it. It's like, I'm a little bit out of tune. It's just to make sure that you listen to what I'm playing.
Maybe I should start speaking that way as well.
Yeah, I would prefer. I would prefer not.
Now I know very little of the brain, and there's one thing that is always kept me wondering for a long time. You keep on hearing people that they say like, oh, people are musically talented. They could also be very well at the mathematics. Now, I know close to nothing mathematics, and I kept wondering, like, what went wrong in my brain?
Brad, because you're a musician too, and a very good one. Like, why can't you understand math the way maybe
exactly
other musicians?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think the good answer to it is that there are many ways of being a good musician. Like I usually say to my PhD students, there are many ways of becoming a good researcher, and we need a lot of different types. And this is the beautiful part about music. It is that you have these students coming at the academy, the music conservatory, and they just want to play exactly like Jaco Pastorius or some really good bass player, right? And they often actually succeed in reaching this level almost, but they're never hired because it's not interesting.
No,
you have
just copycats.
Music is something where you need to make sure that you can express your personality, and there are many examples of people who have probably very little musical abilities in the sense, in the normal sense, the conservatory sense, that have gone really far with their musical abilities. And the thing is, just to get back to it, I think a sense of mathematics is really good when you're practicing. This is something that can help you a lot when you, for instance, one of the things we all do is that we play scales. And then what we do is that we play patterns within the scale. So if you have a scale bum 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 bum, then we play a pattern bum 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 bum, and so forth. And you play a lot of different patterns. And to figure out how many patterns there are and what to practice, it's actually quite good to have a sense of mathematics. But you can also do it in a different way, and you can say, well, I'm not doing it like that. I can play a scale, of course, but then I sort of use my intuition and I listen to music and I get it like that, and then I play stuff that this musician, for instance, has played, and play around with it and are creative with it. So I think there are so many ways of being musical. So it doesn't make any sense to say, well, these are the things that you must have in order to be musical. And of course, this goes back to the whole question of why we have music as a species. It's really a mystery in a way, because of course it's interesting that we all have music. Basically, there are only very few people who are a music or tone deaf or don't get any pleasure from music. So why do we have music? Where does it come from? And of course, there are these different theories, but one of the theories is that, well, you hear everything as music when you're born. The mother's voice when she's trying to speak to you is you have no idea of what she's talking about, but you can hear the music in her, the way she speaks. And what mothers and fathers, of course, but they have only done research on mothers in this case. And what you can see is actually if the mother is speaking to a child in this soft way that mothers can do, it doesn't do anything to them. At least when mothers sing to their child, you can see that the cortisol level, their stress hormone, so it goes down, so they are less stressed when the mothers sing to them and not when they speak to them. So maybe music has this very profound communication of emotions, and you can actually regulate your children already before they have a normal language. And then it continues to be an emotional language that we need, because the normal language is often, at least, so concrete that we need some abstract, direct emotional communication in order for us to function as groups.
I think this relates also to an experiment that you've done, the finger tapping experiment.
Oh yeah. This is my favorite subject. You probably need a little bit of background to understand this, but the thing is that what we know about the brain nowadays and the way we think about it is that we think about it as oscillators. A lot of oscillators. Basically, a neuron is an oscillator, right? So a neuron will fire and communicate to the other neurons. And if you have an assembly of neurons, it'll fire in a way so it creates like these kinds of waveforms that can oscillate at different frequencies. Yeah, so this is basically what the brain does. So when two brain areas are connecting, they're trying to synchronize their oscillations, and this is how you can see that they are communicating. So this is basically what you can observe when you do EEG, for instance, these electrodes that you put on the heads. So what we do as human beings is that we couple our actions. So for instance, when we walk together on the street, we more often than not, we are walking at the same speed, even though our natural way of walking might not be at that speed. So on one side you want to walk at your own speed, on the other you would like to couple your actions to the other person's. And this is very funny because we all do this. We have this research where you put people on rocking chairs and ask them to speak together, and they try to synchronize their rocking with the chairs, even though one chair is much harder to rock than the other, for instance. So this is what we do.
Experiment.
Yeah, and what we could show. So we have these experiments where we put people into two rooms and they're tapping together and they're listening to each other. And this tapping behavior, how they synchronize together, and that can be in different ways. Some couples, one is the leader and the other is the follower, right? In other couples, it's the vice versa. In yet other couples, they're alternating between being leaders and followers, from tap to tap. We call them hyper followers because they're so eager to follow each other. That's the most normal thing. We're so eager to follow each other that we adjust our tapping rate all the time. So and some people are actually also leaders. So if you put two drummers typically in the two rooms, they're just both saying, "I got it." So they're both leaders. I mean,
so there's no synchronization, and they don't follow each other.
No, but they're so good at it. So at least at the rate we're doing it, they're not drifting too much. And we have a large data set where we have people doing this together. And how they do it, all the different ways there are, we can actually very nicely model that as every person having two oscillators. They don't need 1 billion neurons that they have. They only need two neurons that can, maybe two oscillators. Imagine two brains. So in each of the two brains, there are two oscillators. One that sort of mimics what they think the other one is doing, and the other that actually tries to act to tap yourself. So who's responsible for that? So there's one responsible for the incoming, what you listen to, and one responsible to what you have to tap, corresponding to the auditory and the motor system in a way.
Well, I guess I can see how music could help there, because if you're both sort of oscillating to an external source, then you have something that's maybe a little bit more predictable than each other to synchronize with. So you're basically getting into the groove with the music first, and then with each other.
Exactly. Exactly, and this is you're completely right, and this is also why musicians are better at this. They're much better at doing this than non-musicians, of course, because this is what we are trained to do. Everything we do, this is just a small, simple model of what every musician is doing, right?
And is the incentive also, like, if you do get into the groove together, so to speak, that you do copy each other, is that you do produce like this dopamine or oxytocin?
Exactly. And the interesting part is here, we can model this mathematically as two oscillators in each person. A perception and an action model oscillator. But when you brain scan people, because this is of course just a model, we don't know whether it's true or not, but when you brain scan people with EEG, or you're not scanning them, you're measuring them with EEG, then what you see is the auditory cortex, the motor cortex, and the parietal cortex, a cortex which is sort of the mediator between the two. So in my opinion, this is because you perceive it through your ears, then you have to act with your motor system, but you also have to have something in between that couples what you listen to and what you're acting with. This is of course speculation still, but it's striking how this actually works.
Okay, cool. So I had a different question pertaining to drugs, because you always hear that the way people listen to music changes when they take drugs. So I was wondering if you've read any studies on that.
Of course, we're doing them. So we haven't published it yet, so I'm reluctant to talk too much about it. But I can tell you that, of course, different drugs will affect you in different ways. So if you think about alcohol, one thing that an early study showed was that if you get alcohol, you want simpler music.
Wow.
Why am I not surprised?
Wow, that's a good story. But it is actually kind of a little bit interesting to me, because when I was young, I played these party music bands always. And, they would always phone us and say, yeah, we want some really nice jazz. And when you come to the party and they had half a bottle of red wine, then they didn't want jazz. They wanted something really simple. And this is, but even for myself, if I get a little bit, some drinks and so forth, I will happily sing along with the most, what we call dansk top, the old kind of popular, even before popular music, right? So this is one thing, of course. But what we're interested in, especially, is LSD. Because that's a completely different thing. I haven't tried LSD myself. I'm a complete novice when it comes to any kind of drugs. But what the theory is that it de-emphasizes the top-down predictions. So everything that comes in is re-evaluated anew, and you are looking at it and think, oh, what was that? And what that would mean for the brain would be that the brain would be more entropic. And that means that the brain would sort of have much more. Usually, we're talking about brain states, and when we are, for instance, lying on our in our bed, we might go through 5 or 10 different states of the brain in 1/2 minute or something like that. But what the theory on LSD and music would predict, and I'm not telling you what we found. But the theory would predict that we would have much more instances of these brain states, and they would be shifting more rapidly between each other.
Okay.
So,
what are the different brain states we're talking about here?
Yeah, the thing, brain states is the connectivity. So when the ones that wire to, or the ones that are in sync are basically connecting. So you have a network that is, for instance, could be the default mode network, which would be the most common one when we are complete at rest. And this is of course a different places in the brain that is connected. And then it changes to another network and a third network and a motor network and a executive function network and different kinds of networks that sort of shift all the time.
But you don't say these cannot be active at the same time, or we have to shift.
They can basically, in some instances, because they have these nodes that bind them together, so you can have two brain states that are active at the same time. But the more normal thing is that they sort of shift between each other all the time. So and this would simply happen faster and more and more unpredictable in the. But the interesting part is when you then play music, what the theory is, and that might be why everybody uses music when, or that's I've heard that most people use music when they're taking these drugs, especially LSD, And this is also what you prescribe when you use it as a therapy. You use music together with it, and what it makes people give them an anchor that they can hold on to. And what supposedly should be happening is then that the brain, when it gets LSD, it becomes very entropic. Then the music takes it back a little bit, so that in order to better control the trip, right? So that's the theory. Also because music gives you a sense of time.
And that's it. The episode was woven, glued together, slapped in place by me, Rasmus Andersen. Special thanks to Peter Vuust and Bram van Langen for joining me, and to everyone who listened. See you in the next one.